A woman who has spent a lifetime loving and giving, only to be crushed by the very people she raised. A mother's pain runs deeper than any wound, and sometimes the most hurtful betrayal comes from the ones who are supposed to love you the most. But sometimes, breaking free from the chains of neglect can be the beginning of something greater. Subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from, because this story is about to take you on an emotional journey you won't soon forget. I'm Clara, 67 years old, and I never thought I'd find myself here, feeling like I'm invisible in my own home. This is not how I imagined my life after my husband died almost a decade ago. I thought I would grow old with dignity, maybe have some peace, or at least the respect of the people I love. But life has a way of surprising you, and none of it has been kind to me. My son Ethan is the root of it all. He's 30 now, but he's still the same spoiled, entitled boy I raised, just grown into a man who seems to think the world owes him everything. He doesn't care about me. He doesn't care about anyone but himself. I think the hardest part isn't even how he treats me. It's how much I let it happen, how much I tolerated over the years. I was supposed to be a mother to him, but I forgot to be a woman first. We live in a small house in the suburbs of Chicago. One I've kept as clean as I could, despite my growing health problems. I've spent my days making sure Ethan never wanted for anything, giving him everything I could to make him happy. But all he does is sit in his room playing video games, living a life of distractions and shallow friendships, while I go unnoticed. I do everything. I cook, I clean, I pay the bills. But no matter how hard I work, it's never enough. Ethan doesn't help around the house, and when he does, it's always with an attitude. He doesn't respect me. He barely acknowledges my existence unless it's to criticize something. I don't know when it started. Exactly. His disdain for me, for everything I am, but I do know it's been getting worse. Each day feels like another blow to my heart. But there was one day, one moment, that made everything unbearable. I'd been sick for a week, a fever that wouldn't go away, body aches that made getting out of bed a struggle. And instead of sympathy, instead of concern, Ethan barged into my room, sneering as he looked at me in my bed. He crossed his arms, his eyes cold as ever. "Stop faking being sick," he snapped. "You need to start cleaning up this house like a real woman. You're getting lazy." His words hit me like a slap. But worse than that, it felt like a final insult to my very being. Here I was, a woman who had given everything for this child, a woman who had sacrificed everything for this family, and I was being told that I wasn't enough. Not even sick could I escape the role he had forced upon me. I felt my heart break in that moment. I wasn't just sick. I was broken. I was invisible. I was nothing. And for the first time, I asked myself, how did I let this happen? I had tolerated years of this, but something about those words hit differently. I knew I couldn't keep living this way. The worst part was that I had no idea how I had gotten here. When my husband died, I didn't expect Ethan to change overnight, but I thought there would be some grace, some kindness, some understanding. After all, I had just lost the man who had been my life for so many years. But Ethan, he wasn't interested in being supportive. He was interested in his own comfort, his own life. As he stood there, towering over me in my own bed, I realized how little respect I had allowed him to show me. For so many years, I let him treat me like this. I don't know if I was too afraid to challenge him or if I thought it was my duty to sacrifice my own happiness for him. But in that moment, I knew no more. I was tired. I was done. I couldn't do it anymore. The anger swelled inside me, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt something other than sadness. It was rage. It was a fire that lit up every part of me. How dare he? How dare he treat me this way after everything I had done for him? I spent the rest of the day in a daze, still reeling from the sting of his words. I cleaned the house as usual, but it felt like I was moving in a fog. I felt numb to everything. And that night, as I lay in bed, I realized something. I had been living in a lie. Ethan wasn't a little boy anymore. He wasn't the child I once loved and cherished, and I was no longer the woman who would stand by and take it. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I knew I couldn't stay here. I couldn't keep living in this emotional prison. I had given him everything, my love, my care, my life, but it was never enough. And that's when I made the decision. I was leaving. I wasn't sure where I was going or how I would survive without him, but I was leaving. I had to. For me, for the woman I used to be. I had to find her again. And I wouldn't find her by staying here, by allowing Ethan to continue treating me like I didn't matter. The next morning, I left. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't pack much, just enough to get by for a little while. I left him there, in that house we once called home, and I never looked back, not for a second. As I sat in my car, driving away, a strange mix of guilt and relief washed over me. What kind of mother just walks away? What kind of person am I? But the more I drove, the more I realized I was done being a martyr. I was done sacrificing myself for people who didn't appreciate it. I was done. And that's when I realized the truth. This was just the beginning. As I sit here, in this small apartment I rented, I can't help but reflect on everything that led me to this moment. The thought of leaving Ethan, of walking away from everything I had known for so many years, was harder than I ever imagined. But as much as I try to focus on what's ahead, my mind keeps drifting back to the past, the root of it all. Growing up, I never knew what it was like to feel truly loved or valued. My father was a cruel man, one who would belittle me at every turn. He was a man of few words, but when he spoke, it was always to make me feel small, to make me feel like I wasn't good enough. He'd criticize the way I looked, the way I spoke, the way I carried myself. I remember countless times, just a little girl, standing in front of him, desperately hoping for a kind word, but all I ever got was scorn. I don't know why I accepted it, but I did. I just accepted that this was what I deserved. I remember watching my mother, her face always tired, always silent, never speaking up for herself. She seemed to think that this was just the way things were, that she had no right to expect more. I learned from her, I suppose. I learned that silence was the way to survive. I learned that if I kept my head down and didn't cause trouble, I wouldn't be punished, but I wouldn't be loved either. The pattern continued when I married George. I thought I was escaping my father, but in reality, I just found a different version of him. George wasn't a cruel man, not in the traditional sense, but he was indifferent, emotionally distant. He never really saw me. He never really saw me for who I was. Instead, he saw me as someone who would take care of everything. Someone who would never ask for more, never demand anything for herself. And I did. I was the perfect wife, the perfect mother. I gave and gave, but there was nothing left for me, nothing for Clara. It wasn't until George died that I realized how much of myself I had given up for others. I had lost my identity in trying to please the people around me. I was so used to being unnoticed, to being taken for granted, that when George passed, I didn't know how to find my way back to who I was. And then came Ethan. When Ethan was born, I thought everything would be different. I thought I could pour all my love into him, that he would be the one to fill the empty spaces in my heart. But instead, I ended up repeating the same mistakes, allowing him to treat me the same way I had been treated. I loved him so much, but I never gave him the tools to understand love in return. I gave him everything, my time, my affection, my care. But in the end, I realized it was never enough. He was never enough for me, and I was never enough for him. The first time Ethan disrespected me, I brushed it off. The first time he ignored my needs, I thought maybe I was just being too sensitive. And when he started to take advantage of me, I blamed myself. I thought, this is just how it is. This is what I deserve. I didn't see the pattern. I didn't see how I was repeating the same mistakes my mother had made, how I was allowing the same cycle of emotional neglect to consume me. And then there was the sickness. It's strange how something as simple as a cold can be the tipping point, the thing that finally opens your eyes to everything you've been blind to. I look back now, and I realize that I've spent my whole life accommodating others, never asking for what I need, never speaking up, never standing up for myself. I never learned how to do that. I never learned how to say, enough. But now I see it clearly. My silence, my passivity, it's been a prison that I built for myself. I allowed others to lock me in, to dictate my worth, and I accepted it. I accepted that my feelings didn't matter, that my needs didn't matter, because I didn't believe I had the right to ask for more. I didn't believe I had the right to demand respect, to demand love. And now, here I am, 45 years of living for everyone else, and no one has ever really seen me. No one ever asked, what does Clara need? The hardest part of all this, of walking away from Ethan, of leaving behind everything I've known, is that I feel guilty. Guilt weighs heavy on my chest every time I think about my son, about the choices I've made. But deep down, I know this is the only way I can start to break the cycle. I can't fix Ethan, I can't fix the past, but I can stop living in the same cycle of neglect and self-sacrifice. I've spent my whole life bending for others. Maybe it's time I learned to stand tall for myself. And yet, even now, as I sit here alone, I find myself wondering, am I making the right choice? But then, in the stillness of the apartment, a voice from my past echoes in my mind. You're not a doormat, Clara. You are more than this. And for the first time in a long time, I let myself believe it. The days after I left Ethan felt strange, as if I were existing in a fog. I didn't feel the relief I expected. I didn't feel free. Instead, there was an emptiness, a hollow space where my life used to be. The first few weeks in my new apartment were the hardest. The silence was deafening, the loneliness suffocating. I thought that running away would somehow make me feel lighter, make me feel whole again. But instead, I was confronted with the reality of my own isolation. I tried to distract myself, keeping busy, cleaning, unpacking my things, making the apartment feel like home. But nothing could fill the void inside me. Ethan's absence should have brought peace, but instead, it made me feel like I was missing something vital, like I had lost a part of myself. And then one afternoon, as I was sitting at the kitchen table, flipping through old photo albums, I got the call. It wasn't a number I recognized, but I answered anyway. It was a voicemail from the bank. Your account has been flagged for unusual activity, the robotic voice droned on. We've noticed multiple high-dollar purchases made over the past few months. Please call us immediately. I stared at the phone for a long time. My heart pounded in my chest. The weight of the world felt like it was pressing down on me in that moment. My mind raced. What was Ethan doing? What had he gotten himself into? I called the bank right away. After a long, uncomfortable hold, a woman's voice came on the line. Ma'am, can you verify your identity? I did. I felt my hands trembling as she went through the details. And then, she dropped the bomb. Your son, Ethan, has been using your credit card for gambling and online purchases. He's made several large transactions, including buying gaming equipment, and there's also been a series of charges to a casino website. You've also made a number of withdrawals that have been flagged. I was stunned, speechless. My stomach churned, and a cold sweat broke out across my forehead. Ethan, my son, he'd been stealing from me. He had been using my money, the money I had worked so hard to save, to fuel his addiction. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. I thought I knew him. I thought I understood him. But this was beyond anything I had imagined. I was devastated. The shock, the anger, the betrayal, it all crashed over me in waves. As the bank representative continued speaking, telling me what steps I needed to take to freeze the account, I could barely process her words. I could barely breathe. Ethan wasn't just selfish. He wasn't just lazy. He had crossed a line that, once crossed, could never be undone. I felt a deep pain, a wound in my chest that was so raw, so deep, I wasn't sure I could ever heal from it. My son, the child I had sacrificed so much for, had taken advantage of me in the worst way possible. He had stolen from me, not just my money, but my trust, my love, and my entire sense of security. The pain was unbearable, but in that moment, something inside me clicked. It was no longer about him. It was about me. I realized I had spent my entire life being a doormat, allowing others to walk all over me, to take what they wanted without ever considering what I needed. Ethan wasn't the first, and he wouldn't be the last, but I had the power to change that. I didn't want to live like this anymore. I didn't want to keep giving and giving until I had nothing left. I didn't want to be the person who kept hoping for a change that would never come. I had been so passive, so forgiving, for so long. But this time, it was different. This time, I was done. I took a deep breath and made a decision. I wasn't going to let him ruin me. I wasn't going to let him continue to break me down. The anger I had felt for so long, at him, at myself, was suddenly channeled into something else. I blocked Ethan's number, all of his social media accounts. I erased everything. I was cutting him out of my life completely. And then I packed a bag, just a small one, with enough for a few days. I didn't need much. I didn't need him anymore. I left that apartment with nothing but the clothes on my back and a heart full of rage, but also, strangely, a sense of liberation. I didn't know where I was going, but I didn't care. I just knew I couldn't stay there, not with the memory of Ethan's betrayal hanging over me. As I walked out into the cold evening air, The weight on my shoulders seemed to lift. The path ahead wasn't clear, but for the first time in so long, I felt like I was walking towards something better. I didn't know how long it would take for me to heal, or if I even would. I didn't know if I'd ever forgive Ethan, but I knew that this was the start of something new, something where I was finally in control of my own life. I drove without a destination in mind, the city lights blurring outside the window. My heart was heavy, but there was something else there now, strength, a strength I had never known I had. I didn't look back, and I wouldn't. Ethan didn't know what hit him when I left. I could almost feel his confusion, his anger radiating through the phone, even though I refused to answer his calls. The first few days, he probably thought it was a game, that I would come back, like I always had before. But the silence stretched, and with it, the weight of reality began to set in. At first, there were signs of his struggle, but I didn't want to admit it. I didn't want to admit that I had caused this storm. I had left him alone, forced him to face the consequences of his own actions. But in truth, I wasn't sure how much longer I could hold on to this newfound strength of mine if I was to keep seeing what was happening to him. It started slowly. The house, which I had kept in order for so many years, fell into a state of disarray. Dirty dishes piled up, unopened mail cluttered the counters, and the bathroom became a battlefield of old towels and half-used toiletries. Ethan didn't care. Why should he? There was no one left to clean up after him. As the days wore on, I began to hear whispers through the small channels I had left open, through mutual acquaintances and the few neighbors who still kept in touch. People were noticing things. The house was falling apart. The yard, once meticulously tended to, now resembled a jungle. The utilities were going unpaid. And worst of all, Ethan's spending habits, which I had tried so hard to overlook, were now out in the open for everyone to see. The bills piled up like mountains of paper, and the bank came calling. They had given Ethan enough time to pay, but now the house was in danger. There was no one left to bail him out, no one to cover his mess. The reality of it all hit him harder than anything I had ever done. The house was no longer just a home. It was a prison, both physically and financially. I wanted to believe that Ethan would pull himself together, that maybe this was the wake-up call he needed. But I also knew, deep down, that I was fooling myself. This was the end of the line for him. He had no direction, no money, no support, and it was only a matter of time before the chaos he had created would catch up with him. As the bank began the legal process of taking back the house, Ethan became more desperate. He sold whatever he could find of value. The small things I had worked so hard to collect over the years, family heirlooms, furniture, even my old jewelry, everything that had once made our house a home, was now gone. I tried to tell myself that it was just stuff, that none of it mattered in the grand scheme of things. But it hurt. It hurt to know that Ethan had no respect for the sacrifices I had made. His addiction to gambling and online games was spiraling out of control. Every time I spoke to him, even in passing, there was a new excuse, a new justification for why he couldn't pay the bills, why he couldn't be responsible. He'd hide behind the same excuses I had heard so many times before. "I'll turn it around," he'd say, but his eyes always betrayed him. I could see the emptiness in them, the desperation. It was a slow, agonizing process, watching him lose everything. And yet, part of me knew he wasn't done yet. I couldn't help but wonder if I was too late. Was this really his rock bottom? Or was he still sinking? He would lie to everyone, pretend like he was fine, pretend like everything was normal. But I knew better. The friends he once hung out with were gone, no longer calling or stopping by. The walls of that once bustling house closed in on him, leaving only the noise of his own mistakes. And then, one day, he called me. The phone rang in the middle of a cold afternoon. I had just finished a cup of tea, the steam still rising from my mug, when I saw his name flash on the screen. My heart twisted. I almost didn't answer it, but I did. "Mom," his voice cracked. "I need you to come back. Please, I don't know what to do." For a moment, I just listened to him, his words coming in broken sobs, his voice almost unrecognizable. The boy I raised, the boy I once held in my arms, was gone. In his place was a broken man, one who had destroyed everything, including himself. "I can't help you anymore, Ethan," I said, my voice steady despite the tears I refused to let fall. "I can't keep doing this. You have to fix this on your own." His response was a long silence, then a bitter laugh. "Yeah, well, thanks for nothing, Mom. You just left me here to rot. I heard the anger in his voice, but there was something else too, fear. A fear I hadn't heard before. He wasn't angry at me anymore. He was angry at himself. The call ended abruptly. I didn't know if he would try again, but I knew I had made the right decision. I wasn't going to enable him anymore. I wasn't going to fall back into the same old cycle of rescuing him. Ethan was sinking fast, deeper into his own abyss. I could feel it. He was spiraling, and there was nothing left to hold on to. The pain I had felt in the beginning, the deep ache of leaving him behind, was still there, but now it was joined by something else. The certainty that, for him to ever change, he needed to hit rock bottom first. He needed to face the consequences of his actions. He needed to see just how far down he had gone before he could find a way out. I wasn't going to save him anymore, and it hurt more than I ever imagined. But maybe, just maybe, this was the only way to help him. Months had passed since I left Ethan. Each day without him was a new challenge, but also a new step toward reclaiming my life. The apartment, once filled with the sharp edges of emptiness, had started to feel like a place I could truly call my own. I learned to appreciate the silence, to enjoy moments of solitude that once terrified me. My life was no longer a constant stream of obligations to others, and I began to heal in ways I never thought possible. But even in my new world, the shadow of Ethan loomed large. I had made the decision to step away from him, not out of hatred, but because I knew that was the only way he could ever find the strength to stand on his own 2 feet. Or so I told myself. Then, one afternoon, the letter came. It was an envelope from the bank, stiff and cold, its contents suffocating in their finality. The words leapt off the page, as if mocking me. Notice of foreclosure. I read it 3 times, my hands trembling. My mind refused to comprehend what was in front of me. But the message was clear. The house, the home I had spent so many years nurturing, the place that had once held so much life, was about to be taken away. The reason? Ethan's failure to pay the bills, his inability, or perhaps his refusal, to take responsibility for anything in his life. I didn't know if I was more devastated by the fact that Ethan had let it all slip away, or by the realization that I had allowed him to get this far. The house was at risk of foreclosure, and that letter was just the beginning. If nothing changed, everything we had built together, the life I thought we could salvage, was gone. The truth hit me like a ton of bricks. Ethan had no one to help him now. He had pushed away all the people who cared. He had isolated himself in his own destructive world. And I was the only one left who could do anything about it. But could I even do anything at this point? Was there anything left to save? For the first time in months, I felt the weight of all the decisions I had made. I was angry. Angry at Ethan for being so reckless. Angry at myself for letting it go this far. Angry at the life that had led me down this path. But amidst that anger, a pang of guilt twisted in my chest. I couldn't deny it any longer. I still loved him, despite everything. He was my son, and the thought of him losing everything he had left made my heart ache in a way I couldn't ignore. The days that followed were filled with a frantic energy I couldn't shake. I contacted the bank, trying to figure out if there was any way to stall the foreclosure, but it was clear that time was running out. Each call I made felt like a desperate grasp at something that was already slipping through my fingers. But then, one evening, as I sat alone in my apartment, I felt a sudden, overwhelming need to go back. I had made my decision. I couldn't let him fall into the abyss alone. I would return. The thought hit me out of nowhere, almost like an impulse. There was no real logic to it, nothing that made sense other than the deep, burning compulsion I felt in my chest. It was as if a part of me had always known that this wasn't over, that I couldn't walk away from Ethan forever. It was time to do what I should have done long ago, show him what it meant to be truly loved, even if it had to be tough love, even if it meant that I would be hurt again. Because this time, I wasn't going back to save him from the consequences of his actions. I was going back to give him one last chance to save himself. I packed a bag, much lighter this time, knowing it wasn't about me anymore. It was about him. I took a deep breath before leaving the apartment. I wasn't sure what to expect, or if anything would change, but I knew one thing. I couldn't sit back and watch my son lose everything. Not when I still had the power to help him find his way out of the mess he had made. The drive back to the house was long and silent, the roads familiar, but the situation so different from the last time I had left. I couldn't stop the thoughts that plagued my mind. Was I making a mistake? Was I just enabling him again? But deep down, I knew I had to do this. I had to face him. I had to be there for him, even if it meant setting aside my own pain. When I pulled up to the house, my heart sank. The yard was overgrown, the mailbox had fallen over, and the windows were dark, as if the house itself had given up. I had spent years making this place a home, pouring love and care into it, and now it seemed as though everything had withered away. I knocked on the door, and the sound echoed into the empty space. There was no answer, so I turned the handle. The door creaked open, and the smell of neglect hit me immediately. The house was in shambles, dirty dishes piled up in the kitchen, papers scattered across the floor, the once loved furniture now covered in dust. I called his name. Ethan? Nothing. I moved through the house quietly, not sure what I expected to find. I checked the living room, then the kitchen, and finally, I opened the door to his room. There he was, sitting in the middle of the room, surrounded by the remnants of his old life, empty soda cans, fast food wrappers, and the clutter of a broken man. His eyes met mine, and for the first time in so long, I saw the boy I used to know, the one who needed his mother, the one who wanted to be loved. His face was gaunt, his skin pale, and there was a hollowness in his eyes that scared me more than anything I had ever seen. "Mom," he whispered, and for a moment I thought he was going to break down in front of me, but he didn't. He just sat there, staring, unsure of what to say, unsure of what to ask for. I felt my heart twist. I wasn't sure what had brought me back here, whether it was guilt or love or a little bit of both, but in that moment, I knew something had to change. "I'm not here to save you, Ethan," I said quietly. "I'm here to help you save yourself." And so, it began again. It felt like a fresh start, yet the weight of everything that had led me here still lingered. The house, once my sanctuary, had become a symbol of neglect and pain. But I was determined to change that, determined to rebuild. This time, not just the house, but my relationship with Ethan. I made the decision to send Ethan to rehab. It wasn't a decision I took lightly. Part of me felt like I was enabling him again, doing everything for him. But another part of me knew that if he was ever going to find his way, he needed a solid foundation to start from. He had to be in a place where he could face his demons and start working through them, free from the distractions of his old life. It was hard to let go, hard to watch him walk out of the door, knowing that he was still so broken, still so lost, but I did it. But I signed the papers, I made the calls, and I sent him off to a place where he could get the help he desperately needed. The rehab center was miles away, and at first, I didn't hear much from him. A part of me hoped he would find the strength to fight his addiction, that he would come back a changed man. But I also knew that it wouldn't be easy. The journey was going to be long. Still, I couldn't help but hope. While Ethan was away, I took the time to rebuild the house. The clutter was gone, the broken furniture replaced with something new, something that felt like it could have a future. I scrubbed the floors, painted the walls, and made sure every room reflected the fresh start we both needed. It was strange at first. A part of me felt like I was redoing everything I had done before, trying to erase the years of heartache and mistakes. But I pressed on, pushing through the memories of everything that had happened here, determined to make this house a home once more. For me, for Ethan. When Ethan returned, he seemed different. He looked thinner, quieter, but there was a glimmer of something in his eyes that hadn't been there before, a kind of hope, though fragile, that made me believe he had changed. I welcomed him back into the house with open arms, hoping that the rehab would be the turning point he needed. "I'm proud of you for going through with it," I said to him as we sat down together on the couch. I meant it, though I was careful with my words. I didn't want to set him up for failure by expecting too much too soon. The road to recovery would be slow. I knew that, but I also knew it was possible. "I want to do better, Mom," Ethan said, his voice quiet but sincere. "I want to make things right. I know I've hurt you, and I know I've messed up, but I'm trying." That was all I needed to hear. I had to believe in his words. I had to give him that chance. So I offered him a second chance, one that wasn't easy for me. I told him he could live with me while he got back on his feet. He could stay as long as he needed, but there were rules, clear boundaries. No more lying, no more excuses. He had to show me, through his actions, that he was committed to changing. At first, things went well. Ethan seemed more motivated. He attended his therapy sessions regularly. He worked on rebuilding his relationship with me. and for a while I believed that this time was different. I felt a sense of relief, even a sense of joy, that we were finally moving in the right direction. But then, slowly, the cracks began to show. It started with small things, ignoring my requests, missing therapy appointments, and making excuses when he didn't do the things he said he would. He'd spend hours locked away in his room, the glow of his computer screen casting shadows across his face. He was drifting back into his old habits, the ones he had before rehab, the ones that had caused all the pain. I tried to confront him about it, gently at first. "Ethan, you're not keeping your commitments. We agreed on this, remember?" But he just shrugged. "I'm not a kid anymore, Mom. You don't need to treat me like one." The words stung, but I tried to stay calm. "I'm not trying to treat you like a child. I just want you to take responsibility for your actions. We both need to do this together." But each conversation ended the same way. Him retreating, me growing more frustrated. The cycle I had worked so hard to break was starting to repeat itself. One night, I found him in the kitchen, staring at his phone, a slight tremble in his hands. He wasn't gambling, not in the traditional sense, but I could tell he was slipping. He was isolating himself again, getting lost in his own world. "Ethan," I said, my voice softer now, "you promised me you were going to stay clean." "This isn't the way." He turned to face me, his eyes hardening. "Stop controlling me, Mom. I can't live under your thumb forever. I'm trying, okay? I'm doing the best I can." His words were a slap to my face. It felt like a punch to my gut. After everything, after all the sacrifices I had made, this was what I got in return? I took a step back, swallowing the anger that threatened to spill over. "You need to stop making excuses. You're not the only one fighting this. I'm here, trying to help you, but I can't do it for you." He didn't say anything else. He just turned away from me, retreating into his room again. I stood there, helpless, watching him slip away, knowing that there was nothing more I could do. I had given him everything I had, but Ethan wasn't ready. I had hoped for change. I had hoped that rehab would be the turning point. But the old Ethan, the one who had abandoned me, who had manipulated me, who had turned his back on everyone who loved him, was still there. And once again, I was left standing on the edge, wondering if he would ever be able to see the life I had been trying to offer him, or if he would be lost to his own demons forever. The house had begun to feel suffocating once again. The walls, once scrubbed and fresh with the hope of a new beginning, were closing in on me. Every corner, every room, seemed to carry the echoes of the person I once thought my son could be. And yet, day by day, I was confronted with the painful truth that the person who stood before me now wasn't the Ethan I had raised, wasn't the Ethan I had hoped would emerge from the wreckage of his past. It was subtle at first, small things I could overlook, missed therapy sessions, unexplained absences, hours spent behind closed doors. But one evening, the truth hit me like a slap across the face, undeniable and harsh. I found a receipt in the trash, buried beneath a pile of takeout boxes. At first, I thought it was a mistake. I didn't want to believe it. But when I looked closer, my heart sank. It was for a purchase, a significant amount of money, at an online gambling site. And right below that receipt was the confirmation of a recent withdrawal from his account. I felt the blood drain from my face. The horror, the shame, the overwhelming feeling of betrayal, it all rushed through me in a tidal wave. Ethan was back in the grip of his addiction. He hadn't just slipped. He had fallen headfirst into the same abyss he had crawled out of before, and I had been too blind to see it. I went to his room, my heart hammering in my chest. When I opened the door, I found him hunched over his computer, the glow of the screen lighting up his face in an eerie, hollow way. He didn't even look up when I entered. His fingers clicked away furiously at the keys, as if he didn't have a care in the world. But I knew better now. I knew exactly what he was doing. "Ethan," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, "what is this? I saw the receipt. Are you gambling again? After everything? After rehab?" He didn't flinch, didn't even stop what he was doing. His eyes were glued to the screen, his face as cold and distant as it had ever been. "I'm fine, Mom. Just leave me alone. I'm not doing anything wrong." The words came out sharp, dismissive, like a slap. His tone was the same one he'd used so many times before, the one that shut me out, made me feel invisible, the same one that had built the walls between us. "No, Ethan," I said, trying to hold on to my composure. "You're not fine. You're not fine at all. You promised me you'd change, and now I find out that you're right back where you were before. I can't be part of this anymore." The anger in me surged, but so did the sadness. I had hoped, prayed even, that this time would be different, that the Ethan I had seen in rehab, the one who seemed like he was really trying, would finally break free from the cycle. But it wasn't enough, and now, here I was, facing the cold, hard reality. Ethan wasn't ready. He wasn't ready to change. He turned to me then, his eyes filled with the same empty defiance I had seen before. "Don't act like you're some kind of saint." "Mom," he sneered, "you didn't do anything to help me. You just abandoned me when things got hard. You think you can just come in here, tell me what to do, and fix everything? It doesn't work like that." I felt the sting of his words, the cruel accusations that cut deep, but I knew what he said wasn't the truth. I had tried to help him. I had done everything I could, and still, it wasn't enough. Nothing was ever enough. I looked at him, really looked at him, and realized something that hurt more than any word he could say. Ethan wasn't the person I had hoped for anymore. He wasn't the child I had raised. And it wasn't because of anything I had done wrong. He had chosen this path. He had chosen to stay in his addiction, to run from the pain instead of facing it. The realization hit me like a tidal wave. I could no longer live in the same house with a son who refused to respect me. I could no longer bear the constant barrage of disrespect, the manipulation, the lies. I couldn't keep enabling his self-destructive behavior. I couldn't keep being part of this toxic cycle. The pain was unbearable. A mother should never have to make a decision like this. But in that moment, with all my love for him still in my heart, I knew what had to be done. "I can't do this anymore, Ethan," I whispered, the words feeling like a weight that I could barely carry. "I've given you everything I have, but I can't keep letting you destroy yourself, and I can't let you drag me down with you. You need to find your own way." His face twisted in anger, his lips curling into a snarl. "So what? You're just going to walk away? Is that it?" I shook my head, feeling the tears sting my eyes. "I'm not walking away from you, Ethan. I'm walking away from this life we've built together because I refuse to be part of your destruction anymore. You need to take responsibility for yourself. I can't do it for you." The finality of those words broke something inside me. The hardest thing I had ever done was walk out of that room and out of his life. But I had no choice. He wasn't ready to change, and I had spent my whole life being dragged along, trying to fix someone who didn't want to be fixed. I had done everything I could, and now it was time to let go. As I closed the door behind me, the weight in my chest was unbearable. But there was something else, something I hadn't felt in years, a strength, a clarity that I hadn't known I had. I wasn't giving up on Ethan, but I was giving up on the idea that I could save him. I was done being his savior. I couldn't fix him. I couldn't fix the years of damage, but I could fix myself. I could stop the cycle, stop letting myself be dragged into the chaos, stop allowing his addiction to dictate my life. And for the first time in a long time, I felt the stirrings of freedom. The nights were the hardest. It wasn't the cold that cut through his bones, though that too gnawed at him like an incessant reminder of how far he had fallen. No, it was the silence, the deep, suffocating silence that surrounded him wherever he went. The streets weren't just cold and lonely, they were unforgiving. Every corner he turned, every shadow he passed, reminded him that he was nothing, just another face in the crowd of broken people, another soul lost to the chaos he had created. Ethan had never known what real loneliness was until now. As he wandered the streets, his once proud and unbothered demeanor shattered like glass. There was no more running from himself, no more pretending that everything was fine. The mask was gone, and all that was left was a young man, desperate for a way out, but too far gone to find the door. He had spent the first few nights crashing on benches or in abandoned buildings, the concrete a cold substitute for the comfort of home. The longer he stayed out there, the harder it became to keep his head above water. His addiction clawed at him relentlessly, pulling him deeper into the pit. The drugs, the gambling, the fleeting highs, they were all that kept him from drowning completely. Each fix was a small escape from the overwhelming shame that filled his chest. But it was never enough. His money was running out, just like the few friends he had left. The people who had once been his crew were now as distant as the stars, no longer answering his calls, no longer interested in his hollow promises of change. Ethan's pride, once his shield against the world, was now his cage. He refused to reach out to anyone, especially not his mother. He had burned that bridge too many times, and the fear of admitting he was wrong, of needing her again, felt worse than the isolation. He missed her. God, how he missed her. The ache in his chest was unbearable. Clara had always been there for him, even when he didn't deserve it. She had tried to save him, to guide him, but he had pushed her away, making excuses, lying, and pushing her to the edge until she couldn't take it anymore. Now, it was too late. He knew that. He knew he had broken her, had broken the one person who had truly cared about him. And that realization, more than anything, felt like a dagger to his heart. But he couldn't let himself need her. He couldn't let himself be that weak. Every time he thought about calling her, about asking her for help, his pride screamed at him to stop. "You're not a kid anymore," he'd tell himself, the same words he had used to push her away. "You can handle this yourself." But he couldn't. He couldn't handle anything anymore. The days blurred into one another, a never-ending cycle of desperate attempts to numb the pain. Each morning, he woke up on the cold concrete, his body aching, his mind foggy from the last night's highs. He had nothing left, not even the faintest glimmer of hope that he could ever climb out of the mess he had made. He had tried, once, or maybe he had just told himself he would try. Rehab, promises to Clara, the fleeting moments when he felt like he could make a change, but the darkness inside him was too strong, the addiction too powerful, and now there was no way out. Ethan had hit rock bottom, but it wasn't the kind of rock bottom that made you want to rise up. No, it was the kind that kept you in place, frozen in despair, with no way of seeing past the darkness. The shame was like a weight on his chest, suffocating him, and with every step he took, he felt more and more like he was sinking into the quicksand of his own making. The streets had become his home, his prison. He was no longer the boy who had dreams and ambitions, no longer the son Clara had raised. Now he was just another broken soul wandering the streets, consumed by rage, fear, and addiction. There were moments, brief, fleeting moments, when he thought about reaching out, when he thought about calling his mother, apologizing, begging her to come back and save him. He missed the comfort of her voice, the safety of her presence. But the walls of pride he had built around himself were too high. He couldn't let them crumble, not yet. And so, he stayed silent. He stayed lost. As the days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, Ethan's world grew smaller. The people who had once shared his vices drifted away, and he was left with nothing but the gnawing emptiness that he couldn't escape. He had no one except himself, and that, he had to admit, was the scariest part. Deep down, he knew something had to change, but in the suffocating silence of the streets, Ethan had no idea how to begin. The desperation, the fear, the guilt, they all melded together, and the crushing weight of them all was enough to keep him paralyzed. He had made too many mistakes, hurt too many people, and now it seemed like there was no way out. But in those rare moments of clarity, when the fog of addiction lifted just enough, he would remember Clara. He would remember the warmth of her embrace, the love in her eyes, and the life they had once shared. And for a brief, impossible moment, he wondered if there was any way back to that life. But pride wouldn't let him ask for help, and fear kept him from believing it was even possible. So, he kept walking in the dark, hoping that one day, somehow, he would find a way to turn his life around. But the road ahead seemed endless, and the distance between him and the person he used to be, between him and the person his mother had always believed he could be, felt like a chasm he could never cross. It had been months since I walked away, but even now, the absence of Ethan haunted me in ways I couldn't quite put into words. The silence in my apartment felt heavier than any sound. I had gotten used to being alone, to having my own space, my own time. But in the quiet moments, when I allowed myself to really think, there was always a shadow, a memory of the son I had loved, the son I had tried to save, and the son who had broken my heart over and over again. I had worked hard to create a life for myself here, far from the chaos of my old home, far from the constant anxiety of Ethan's struggles. I found comfort in the simplicity of my days, reading, tending to my small garden, even taking long walks around the neighborhood. But despite all the things I had gained in my solitude, there was a gnawing emptiness that wouldn't go away. I couldn't stop thinking about him. I thought the pain would fade. I thought that by distancing myself, I could protect myself from the relentless ache of wanting to help him, of feeling responsible for him. But it didn't work that way. No amount of distance, no amount of self-care could quiet the part of me that was still a mother who, no matter how many times she was hurt, could never stop caring. The love I had for Ethan was still there, buried under the weight of all the mistakes, but it was undeniable. I missed him more than I ever expected, ever. I missed his laughter, the way he would talk about his dreams, even though they seemed so far-fetched. I missed being his safe place, the one he could always come to when the world felt too big. And I missed the boy I knew he could be, the boy I had raised with so much hope and love. I tried not to think about how he was doing. I tried to bury the thought of him in the streets, alone, struggling. But no matter how much I tried, the thought wouldn't go away. I could feel the weight of his absence like a constant ache, a reminder that something was broken, and that despite everything, I wasn't ready to let go. I had spent so many years tolerating disrespect, lying to myself, and convincing myself that if I just loved him more, tried harder, things would get better. I had bent so far that I almost lost myself in the process. But now, I understood something I hadn't before. Love was not enough if the other person wasn't willing to meet you halfway. I had learned that the hard way. But I had also learned that love, even from a distance, could still be powerful. It could still drive change if I was willing to let it. I sat on my couch one night, staring at the empty space where he used to sit, the place where I used to wait for him to come home. My heart was heavy with the memories of everything we had been through. He had caused me pain, yes, but there was a deeper truth I couldn't ignore. I still loved him. The fact that he had hurt me so much didn't change that. The fact that I had walked away didn't erase the years of sacrifice, the years of trying to give him everything I had. He was still my son, and no matter how far he had fallen, no matter how many times he had disappointed me, that truth would never change. As I sat there, the weight of my thoughts pressing down on me, something inside me shifted. I knew I couldn't keep living like this. I couldn't keep pretending that I was okay, pretending that I had no desire to help him. I had made my peace with the fact that I couldn't save him, that he had to want to change for himself. But I also knew, deep down, that I had to be there for him, that I couldn't let him slip through my fingers without trying one last time. I couldn't fix him, but maybe, just maybe, I could help him find his way. So, I made the decision. I would go to him. I would find him wherever he was and give him one last chance. This time, it would be different. I wouldn't be the same desperate, self-sacrificing woman I had been before. This time, I would go in with eyes wide open. I would be firm but compassionate. But I would hold the boundaries I had set, but I would show him the love he needed, the love he had never truly known how to accept. I would not let him destroy himself. I would not let him stay lost. The next morning, I packed a small bag, not sure what I would find, not sure if he would even want to see me. I didn't know where he was, but I would search for him. I would do whatever it took to bring him back, not to the life I wanted for him, but to a place where he could finally find peace with himself. And so, I set out on a journey I had been avoiding for so long, a journey that would require not just my love, but my strength. This time, I wasn't going to fall into the trap of rescuing him from everything. I wasn't going to do the hard work for him, but I would walk beside him, patiently, with a heart full of hope and the wisdom of everything I had learned. It wouldn't be easy. It would never be easy, but I was ready. And for the first time in years, I felt a sense of purpose return to me. I was no longer just the woman who had been hurt. I was a mother who was ready to fight for her son, not by fixing his mistakes, but by showing him how to rise above them. I didn't know what the future would hold, but I knew one thing for sure. Ethan deserved one more chance, and I was going to make sure he had it. It was a strange thing, bringing Ethan back into my life after everything we'd been through. The house felt quieter somehow, emptier, like it was holding its breath, unsure of what was to come. I didn't know what to expect. Would he be different this time? Or would I find myself back where I started, lost in the same cycle of disappointment and hurt? But I couldn't turn my back on him. I had made that decision already, and there was no turning back. The hardest part wasn't bringing him back into my home. It was allowing myself to believe that he could change, that after everything he had done, He could still be the person I had once hoped he would become. The first few days were uncomfortable. Ethan was withdrawn, barely speaking, his eyes dark with shame and fear. I could tell he wasn't sure how to start again, how to fix what he had broken. I wasn't sure either. But I knew I had to be patient. I couldn't rush him. I couldn't fix him overnight. The road ahead was going to be long, and we both knew it. We sat down that first night, just the two of us, at the kitchen table. I could feel the weight of the silence between us, thick and suffocating, but I had to break it. I had to set the tone for what was to come. "Ethan," I said, my voice steady but soft, "I'm not going to rescue you. I'm not going to fix your mistakes, and I won't cover for you. But I will walk beside you if you're willing to do the work, if you're willing to fight for yourself." His eyes flickered with something I couldn't quite place. Maybe it was fear, maybe it was shame, or maybe, just maybe, it was the flicker of hope, the hope that he could still change, that he could still be the person I had believed in all those years ago. "I don't know if I can do this, Mom," he whispered, his voice raw. "I don't know if I'm strong enough." "I believe you are," I said, my heart aching at the vulnerability in his voice. "But I need you to believe it too. This won't be easy. It'll be the hardest thing you've ever done, but it's the only way." We both sat there, a fragile understanding hanging in the air. I had set the boundaries. No more lies, no more excuses, no more toxic behavior. But I also made a promise to him. I would be there. Not to carry him, but to help him find his own strength. The next day I took him to therapy. At first he resisted, unwilling to talk, unwilling to face the demons he had buried deep within himself. But I insisted. I wasn't going to let him retreat again. Not into himself, not into the darkness that had almost swallowed him whole. The therapy sessions were tough. Ethan struggled to open up, his walls thick and built from years of hurt and disappointment. He would sit there in silence, the therapist's questions hanging in the air like an unspoken challenge. But each session, he started to crack a little more. He began to share pieces of himself, pieces that I hadn't seen in so long. I could tell it wasn't easy for him, that he was fighting against the urge to shut down, to hide. But he was trying, and that was all I could ask for. Alongside therapy, I encouraged him to attend church with me. I wasn't sure if he would go for it, if he would resist, but surprisingly, he didn't fight me on it. Maybe it was because he didn't know where else to turn, or maybe it was because he was searching for something he couldn't name. We started going every Sunday, sitting in the back row, and for the first time in a long time, I saw a flicker of peace in his eyes. The sermons were simple, but they seemed to resonate with him, with both of us. For once, we weren't just living in the chaos. We were trying to heal, trying to find something greater than ourselves to hold on to. The change wasn't immediate. There were days when I wanted to give up, days when I felt like we were moving backward instead of forward. But over time, Ethan started to show small signs of recovery. He began to open up more, to speak more honestly about his struggles, his fears, and the pain he had been running from for so long. He stopped hiding behind the excuses and began to take responsibility for his actions, for the hurt he had caused me and himself. He still struggled with his addiction, still fought the temptation to fall back into the old habits. But there were fewer nights spent locked away in his room, fewer days spent glued to the computer screen. Slowly, the distance between us began to shrink. He would help me with chores around the house, would offer to make dinner, would ask about my day. The boy who once refused to acknowledge me was starting to come back, piece by piece. But it wasn't just his behavior that was changing. It was the way he saw me. For the first time, I could see him beginning to understand the depth of the pain I had endured, the sacrifices I had made. One night, as we sat on the porch together, he turned to me with a quiet, hesitant voice. "I'm sorry, Mom," he said, his eyes downcast, "for everything, for the things I said, for the things I did. I didn't realize how much I hurt you. You didn't deserve any of it." The words were simple, but they hit me harder than anything he had ever said before. I knew it wasn't easy for him to say them, and I knew it wasn't a complete fix, but it was a start. It was the first time I heard him acknowledge my pain, the first time I saw him not just as a son, but as a man who understood the consequences of his actions. I didn't say anything at first. I just sat there, watching the sun dip below the horizon, feeling the weight of everything that had happened between us. But I knew, in that moment, that this was the beginning of something real. Ethan was still in the process of rebuilding himself, and so was I. But for the first time in a long time, I believed that it was possible. It wasn't a fairy tale. It wasn't a perfect recovery, but it was progress. And sometimes, progress was all you could ask for. "I'm proud of you," I finally said, my voice thick with emotion. "But don't stop now. You've got a long road ahead of you, but I'll be here, every step of the way." And for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt hopeful. Hopeful that maybe, just maybe, we could rebuild our lives together. The progress had been slow, painful, and at times, almost imperceptible. But it was there. I saw it. Ethan was trying, and that was enough to keep me fighting, even on the days when my hope felt threadbare. His recovery wasn't linear. It wasn't as simple as a few therapy sessions, a couple of church visits, and everything being miraculously fixed. It wasn't that easy, but he had taken steps, and I was learning to trust that he could continue walking forward, no matter how many times he stumbled. But then, the old demons returned. It started with small things, slips in his behavior that I had hoped were behind us. A missed therapy session here, a late-night gaming binge there. Nothing too dramatic at first, nothing that seemed out of the ordinary. But as the weeks passed, the cracks began to widen. Ethan began to withdraw again, locking himself in his room more often, spending long hours in front of his computer screen. I could see the tension in his face, hear the thinly veiled excuses in his voice whenever I asked if he was okay. And then, one evening, the truth hit me like a freight train. I had gone out for a walk, needing some space, needing to clear my head after a long day of work. When I returned home, I found him sitting on the couch, his eyes bloodshot, his fingers twitching. The room smelled faintly of alcohol, and there was a subtle, yet unmistakable change in the air. "Ethan," I said, my heart racing, "what's going on?" He looked at me, his gaze hollow. He didn't speak at first, just stared at the floor. But the shame was clear. His shoulders were hunched, as if carrying a weight too heavy for him to bear. I messed up, Mom," he said finally, his voice quiet, almost a whisper. I thought I could control it, but I can't. My breath caught in my throat. This was the moment I had feared, the moment where everything felt like it was slipping away again, the moment when I had to face the reality that no matter how much I wanted to believe in his recovery, no matter how much I wanted to trust him, there would be setbacks, there would be times when he failed. "Ethan," I said, my voice trembling, "do you understand what this means? Do you understand how far you've come, and how far you've just fallen?" He nodded, but the emptiness in his eyes told me that the shame wasn't enough to snap him out of it. He didn't have the strength yet, and as much as I wanted to scream, as much as I wanted to give up, I knew that this was the final test. This was the moment where everything he had worked for, everything we had worked for, would be put to the test. I sat down next to him, trying to steady my racing heart. The old patterns, the ones that had destroyed everything we once had, threatened to consume me again. I felt the anger bubbling up inside me, the anger that he had betrayed my trust again, the anger that after everything, he was still running from his problems instead of facing them. But then I remembered something that I had nearly forgotten in my frustration. Ethan was still my son, the same boy who used to sit on my lap, laughing and playing, the same boy I had held close in my arms, the same boy I had once been proud of, the boy I had to save. "Ethan," I said, my voice softening, "I'm not going to give up on you, but you have to do the work. This is your fight, not mine. I can't fight this for you anymore. You need to fight for yourself, and I'll be right here beside you. But you need to choose it. You need to choose to face the pain instead of running from it." Tears welled up in his eyes, and I could see the battle raging within him. He wanted to change, but he was still so lost in his pain. He wanted to be better, but he was terrified of the journey it would take to get there. "I don't know how to fix this," he whispered, his voice cracking. "I don't know how to fix me." I took a deep breath, gathering all the strength I had left. This wasn't just about Ethan anymore. It was about me too. It was about not letting my own fear, my own pain, dictate the choices I made. It was about me learning to forgive, not just him, but myself. The forgiveness I was about to offer wasn't easy. It wasn't clean. It wasn't a simple, "everything's okay now" moment. No, the forgiveness I had to give was messy, raw, and painful. But it was necessary for both of us. "I don't expect you to be perfect, Ethan," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I don't expect you to get it right every time, but you have to try. You have to keep trying, because I can't do this for you anymore. You're the only one who can make the choice to get better." Ethan sat there, his face buried in his hands, his body shaking with silent sobs. I could hear the pain in his breath, the weight of all the years he had spent running from his demons. The anger I had felt earlier began to melt away, replaced by something deeper, compassion. I understood his fear. I understood his hesitation. It wasn't just the addiction that was holding him back. It was the shame. It was the fear that he wasn't worthy of redemption. I reached over and placed my hand on his shoulder, giving him the space to cry, to grieve, to let go of all the things he had been holding in for so long. "I forgive you, Ethan," I said quietly. "But I need you to forgive yourself. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to keep trying." For the first time in what felt like forever, Ethan looked up at me, not with shame, but with something more, hope. It was fragile, but it was there. I saw the boy I used to know, the boy who could be so much more than his mistakes. "I'll try, Mom," he whispered. "I'll try." And that was enough. I didn't know what the future held for us, or if he would face more setbacks, but in that moment, I realized that forgiveness wasn't just for him. It was for me, too. I had spent so much time holding on to my own pain, holding on to my own need for things to be perfect, that I had forgotten how to let go. Letting go of the past, letting go of the anger, the fear, the shame, was the only way forward. It was the only way Ethan could truly heal, and it was the only way I could too. Together, we had taken the first step forward. And as painful as it was also the most important one. The journey wasn't over, but we were finally ready to walk it side by side. It's strange, the way life shifts so suddenly, almost imperceptibly, until one day you look around and realize that everything has changed. That's how it felt when I finally saw Ethan standing on his own 2 feet again. Really standing. Not leaning on me, not hiding from his pain or the world. It was a slow process, a gradual transformation that took time, patience, and more tears than I could count. But in the end, it was worth every moment of fear, every sleepless night, and every ounce of hope I had given him. Ethan had been clean for over a year now. A year of therapy sessions I had accompanied him to. A year of hard, grueling work on himself, on us. He had put in the effort. He had made the decision to change. And that was something I had never been sure he could do. But he did. He found his way back. I remember the first time he truly smiled in a way that wasn't tinged with guilt. The first time I saw a spark of the man he could be. He had started to take on small jobs, helping around the house, even taking pride in them. He was still figuring things out, still battling his demons, but he was doing it on his own terms now. And that was the most important thing. We spent more time together now. Not in the way we once did, where I hovered over him, trying to fix his mistakes, but in a way that felt like two people building something new. We talked more, not just about the past, not just about his mistakes, but about the future, about his hopes, his dreams, things that had once seemed so far out of reach. He had found a new sense of purpose, something that made him feel connected to the world again. He had even started volunteering at the local shelter, something he was passionate about. Helping others, he said, made him feel like he could make up for all the harm he had caused. I didn't know if he realized it yet. But it wasn't just about making up for his mistakes. It was about building a future where he could feel proud of himself. Watching him slowly find his way felt like a deep breath I didn't know I had been holding. I watched him, not just as a mother, but as a woman who had walked through fire and come out the other side. I had let go of so much pain, so many expectations, and for the first time, I could see Ethan not just as the child I had lost, but as the man he was becoming. And that man, he was strong, he was capable, he was worthy of love, he was worthy of happiness. I had been so focused on trying to fix him that I hadn't realized how much I was hurting myself in the process. I had spent so many years sacrificing my own needs, my own identity, to take care of him. I had allowed myself to be consumed by the chaos of his life, thinking that if I just gave more, loved harder, tried harder, things would change. But I had to come to terms with the fact that change doesn't happen because someone else wills it. Change happens when the person who needs it decides to make the choice. Ethan had made that choice, and so had I. I had spent so long living in the shadow of my own fear, of my own self-doubt, the years of abuse, the endless suffering, the guilt that kept me trapped in a cycle of trying to fix things. Those things no longer defined me. For so long, I thought my identity was tied to being a mother, to being a caretaker, to being the one who always had to fix the broken pieces. But I had forgotten something along the way. I had forgotten that I was not broken, that my strength, my resilience, had always been within me. The day I realized that I wasn't bound by my past, that I wasn't responsible for fixing everyone around me, was the day I felt a kind of peace that I hadn't known in years. It wasn't a sudden, dramatic shift. It wasn't like flipping a switch, but rather a quiet understanding that had been slowly building. I had spent so many years living in the shadow of guilt, of duty, of obligation, and in that moment, I realized that the only person I had ever needed to save was myself. And so, I did. I saved myself. Ethan was on his way to becoming the man I had always known he could be, but I was no longer trapped in the role of martyr, of the woman who constantly gave of herself until there was nothing left. I wasn't going to let him or anyone else define my worth. I wasn't going to let my past dictate my future. I found joy in the little things now. Quiet mornings with a cup of coffee, walks in the park, moments of stillness that I had never allowed myself to experience before. I had learned to let go of the things I couldn't control and embrace the things I could. I had learned to love myself, to find value in who I was, not in what I could give to others. And when Ethan came to me one evening, his eyes filled with gratitude, his voice shaking slightly as he said, "Mom, I'm finally proud of myself. I'm finally proud of us," I knew, deep in my soul, that we had both found our way. We had both fought our battles, and we had both won. I had fought for him, yes, but in doing so, I had fought for myself, and that was the greatest victory of all. In the end, it wasn't just about Ethan's recovery, it was about my own. It was about learning to let go of the past, to forgive myself, and to find peace. I had spent so many years waiting for redemption from others, but I had forgotten that redemption doesn't come from anyone else. It comes from within. It comes from choosing to walk away from the things that weigh you down and choosing to walk towards something better. And now, with Ethan standing beside me, stronger, wiser, and ready for the future, I knew that my journey, our journey, was just beginning. I had found my peace, my redemption, my true self, and nothing, not even the years of suffering, could ever take that away. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.